We're going to move on to the next panel. For the folks that have come in during this past hour, my name is Nathan Spencer. I'm Associate Director with WakeUP Wake County. And I am happy to welcome you to WakeUp's second day for Driven to Change. We are sponsored, thankfully, by AARP, Land Landscaping, Go Triangle, Jay Davis, Lime, Carpenter Development, Model Energy, the North Carolina Building Performance Association, Oaks and Spokes, Redesign Build, Rainwater Solutions, the Southern Environmental Law Center, and the Southern Energy Management. There's so many that I need a cheat sheet to be able to go through, and we're very thankful of that. The next panel I'd like to welcome up is our sustainability managers. We've got, and planners, I should say. We've got Niki Jones, Director of Planning for Wendell, Megan Anderson, who is Sustainability Manager for Raleigh, Megan Pendell, who's Sustainability Manager with Apex, and then Emily Barrett from TJ Cog. She also used to be with Carrie, so her knowledge is double. And Emily is going to be moderating our panel this hour. Again, folks, please put your questions into the Q&A. We want to be able to cover as much as possible. And so if you have questions, please drop them in there and we'll try to get to them. Emily will try to get to them as much as possible. Thank you guys, and I look forward to hearing your discussion.
Thank you, Nathan. So we put together a few slides as a group that I will go through, and that's sort of a method to focusing us, and then we'll get to questions. So I encourage you to use the Q&A. Really appreciate everyone turning in today, and let's get started. Let's see here. Okay. How are we doing on, if you can view the slides? Megan Pendell, can you give me a thumbs up? Yes, okay. So I'm Emily Barrett. I'm with the Triangle J Council of Governments. Many people who are active in government aren't aware of what COGs are. So COGs are creatures of the state created in 1968. Our particular COG, the Triangle J Council of Government, serves 7 counties, Wake being the largest. Our really bread and butter is bringing people together to do more, bringing ideas to action to solve really difficult problems, but worthwhile problems. So thanks for having me as the moderator today. Let's get started. Today we have communities and representatives from communities from large to small. At the largest, we have Megan Anderson with the city of Raleigh. Raleigh has about 483,000 people. Next, we have Megan Pendell, the sustainability coordinator for the town of Apex. That's at about 70,000 at this point, I believe. And lastly, but not leastly, the small town with big charm, Wendell. We have Niki Jones, who's the planning director from Wendell. So let's hear a little bit about these 3 communities. Wendell is currently focusing on increasing mobility and looking at options and pathways for removing barriers to using those mobility options like bike lanes and greenways. They're looking at revitalizing existing neighborhoods, recycling, especially in the downtown area, creating a stormwater program, and looking at having local food, a farmer's market. As they look toward the future, and we'll hear more about growth, they're doing an ordinance update. They're looking at green infrastructure, more transit services, and increased walkability. And in Apex, you may or may not know that Megan Pendell has recently come on in the last year as their sustainability coordinator, and that's because Apex has big goals. Apex has a goal of 100% clean energy by 2050 for all their town operations, and a midway goal of 80% by 2035. They also have a 100% clean fleet goal by 2050 for their town fleets. They have an environmental advisory board, and their one-year goals are to create a sustainability plan, create a baseline greenhouse gas inventory, and to integrate community outreach and engagement wherever they can. So planning for sustainability in Apex, as you can see, is not new. I think they're so glad to have Megan on board to really focus their efforts and to get huge amounts of traction quickly. But you can see they did their peak plan recently in 2013, and they have a number of plans that do that triple bottom line, people, planet, prosperity. But we are growing, and we are growing fast. You can see that the population demand, as they anticipate, is going to be huge. They're looking at about 14 residents a day moving to Apex. This is just a snapshot of some of their recent development. You can see that they have a lot of either new development or rezoning and redevelopment. And their slogan, the peak of good living, is at the center of a lot of their sustainability efforts. And you can see here a lot of the words that give structure around really important initiatives. And here's a quote from one of their own staff members: "Individual actions count. What we do together counts more." And I think that's a great theme for this two-day gathering in general. And lastly, not leastly, is Megan Anderson from Raleigh. And Megan has a really excellent team in Raleigh. Let's tell you a little bit about what they're doing, because this is very timely. They're working on the Community Climate Action Plan, what they call the CCAP. And there's 3 main priorities, and keep 3 in your mind because we'll come back to each of these 3. 1 is reducing greenhouse gas emissions. 2 is supporting climate equity. And 3 is building resilience. And while we're talking about Raleigh in specific here, we can use these concepts when we talk about our broader region, right? They're all relevant. So when Raleigh looked at their community-wide emissions, they wanted to know, where do we focus? Where do we get our most strategic reductions? So they did a community-wide greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And what they found is what many communities across the country find. Their top 2, number 1, buildings and energy, number 2, transportation and land use. And the number 3 that you see is a little green piece of pie is these little smaller emissions like waste. Just to give you a little context, Raleigh's municipal operations are only 2% of the total emissions for the community. So it really is important, we'll talk about this later, to work together. So when Raleigh got together, they looked at their emissions projections over time. And you can see the blue here is transportation, and the green here is other energy related strategies. And so their goal was to bring it down close to 0 by 2050. So they focused on energy efficiency, a cleaner grid, transportation, electrification, and reducing VMTs. So for those of you who don't know what VMTs are, they're vehicle miles traveled. It's just how much people get in their car and drive, right? And these are the largest impact opportunities. So just one structural note, they split their actions into short-term, 0 to 7 years, and long-term, 7+ years. And they looked at those 3, not only the 3 goal areas, but also the 3 areas of emissions. And they were looking for high impact, right? So I'll be asking Megan later about equity, but it is important to note that they had a team of equity advisors who helped define equity in the context of climate change. And for them, they articulated that they wanted to look at the largest contributors, the people who are disproportionately impacted, a just distribution of the benefits of these actions that they're undertaking, and they wanted to deal with the systems that contribute to climate change and perpetuate them, perpetuate not only climate change, but also inequities. So that third one, so we've done two, the third one is resilience. And Raleigh integrated many existing points of data into their resilience work. They looked at the Wake County Hazard Mitigation Plan, a Triangle Regional Resilience Assessment, and the fourth National Climate Assessment, looking at climate data in the Southeast in particular. And they focused on these four things: more frequent and extreme precipitation events that lead to local flooding, higher temperatures and more temperature variability, longer and more frequent droughts. And if you were on with Catherine Hayhoe yesterday, she explained why that is. Robust population growth. So I think growth. It's happening, it's coming, it's here. And so let's talk about it a little. I think the whole panel would like to thank Wake Up Wake County and the Driven to Change team for having us. And I'd like to start a Q&A session with our great panel. So you guys can take yourselves off mute and let's get started. First, I wanted to say hi to Niki. I can see you're there on the golf course. That's lovely. What is the highest priority right now for the town of Wendell on sustainability? Oh, you're on mute, I think. Can't hear you. You know what I'll do is I'll let you work on that for just a sec, and I'll move on to another panelist and we'll see what we can do. Let's see. Oh, this is a fun one for Megan, and I'm gonna look at the Q&A really quick. Okay. Interesting, we've already got a question about stormwater. So Megan Pendell and Megan Anderson would love to hear from you about where you are regarding stormwater in your jurisdictions. What are things that you're currently working on and things that you would like to do, and maybe a little bit about the Climate Connection as well. Megan Pendell, why don't you start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here and representing Apex and being with these who I consider mentors. Absolutely. So stormwater in Apex. We are, of course, with the MPDES Phase 2 program. I'd like to show off that we just passed the audit with DEQ, so very excited about that. And then we break down our stormwater mitigation techniques with water quality and water quantity. So to begin with water quantity, our development right now is required to attenuate the 1-year and 10-year storms, and in some cases even the 25-year storms and watersheds. And then in water quality, we focus on 2 initiatives. So one being that development must meet the North Carolina Stormwater Design Manual, and 2, that we have a pretty robust riparian buffer program. So making sure that we have undisturbed buffers on all perennial and intermittent streams.
Thank you, Megan Pendell. And I'm going to use both of your first and last names, you guys, since we have 2 Megans on the panel. Megan Anderson, would you like to say a little bit about stormwater and not only kind of where you are, but aspirationally?
Sure. Yeah. We had a little bit of a discussion as a group planning for this panel, and we talked about how it's really interesting in our cities. Some groups are kind of just getting started, some are kind of in the middle, and some have been doing this for a while. And I'll say we have some amazing folks in Raleigh working on stormwater, and they'll say, and we say, you know, there's still so much more to do. That's why it's an issue, right? There's a lot more to do. So I really appreciate that we've got a lot of folks, they talk about climate inequity and resilience as they're looking at what to do. We've had, they were part of our Triangle Regional Resilience Assessment, helping us understand a little bit more about how we can mitigate, looking at all those other impacts that we see in the community because of flooding. There are numerous programs we have that provide incentives for folks in the community to think about, especially if you're looking in areas where flooding is the worst. You can get up to 90% of your flood water mitigation programs, like a cistern or a rain garden or different things paid for if you're in those areas. So that's been an interesting program. Rainwater rewards. There's a lot of things they're doing. They're trying to look at the levers and the sticks and all the different things, and always exploring different funding opportunities. We know they've got some good plans. We know we don't always have all the resources to do it all at one time. And so looking at impact and priority as well, and all the different, I would say we look at things a lot around what are the tools in the toolbox and which levers do we pull when. And so there's a lot of those they're creating. And I think, you know, now we're thinking more about the equity of this as well. And we'll get into that more later. But when you look at flooding and who's most affected, there's a lot of connections there with stormwater in our region. And so that's something that I'm really happy to say that the folks are thinking about a lot, and we haven't solved, but it's something we're really trying to address and think about too. So we can talk more about that later in that way. But yeah, stormwater, definitely top of mind.
Thank you, Megan Anderson. Checking in with Niki, see if he has a voice. We want to give him a voice here.
Can you hear me?
Yes, excellent. So feel free to talk about your top priorities, and if you want to throw in some stormwater as well, we'd love to hear that.
Well, that is actually our top priority here in Wendell. We are creating a brand new stormwater program. So we are much younger than the Raleighs and the Apexes of the world, but we are recognizing some of the same challenges because, you know, we're seeing a lot of growth, and thereby there's a lot of stormwater runoff. And especially we've seen so much rain over the past, you know, month, 2 months. I think it's really hitting home. So, you know, again, we're trying to start a new program. First and foremost, we need to do all the mapping on the MS4 level, and then, you know, really education. We're working with our stormwater folks, thinking through what education outreach looks like in our community, and then ultimately responsible for enforcement. So we use Wake County to do our enforcement, and ultimately we want to be responsible for the enforcement.
Thank you so much. Speaking of education and engagement, I think we can talk about education and engagement for any number of sustainability topics, right? It's important, it's hard to do, it's resource intensive. And we had a question in the box about once we engage people, how do we have it not be a one and done? How can we continue to engage people? And I wanted to start with Megan Pendell and kind of frame it up this way. There's a climate activist named Will Grant who talks about the 4 levels of action. So he talks about, you know, number 1 is yourself. What can you do? Number 2 is sort of your family and your friends. Number 3 is your local community. And organizations that you might be part of. And the 4 is kind of state and federal systemic change. And he says one criticism of the activist communities is it focuses on 1 and 4 and neglects the middle 2. But I know, because I've worked in local government, that local government employees really do want to work with people. They want to hear from people. They want to engage people. I've heard Megan Anderson say a number of times, we want to work with people. We want to support, we want to elevate, we want to bring together. So Megan, can you talk a little bit about how people can get involved in their community? And I think, you know, there's a 2-way street. There's kind of how do we communicate and continue to communicate and engage, and then how can citizens tap into opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And, Will Grant is certainly a hero in the activism arena, which is actually my background. I began in grassroots organizing, so that bottom up approach. And now in this new position, sustainability coordinator for a local government, we look at the top down approach. So something that we always hear, the bottom up or the top down approach, which one do we do? What Grant argues is that we really actually need this middle out system. We can influence, make true influence of change through this middle out. And so what that looks like is really out of those 4 levels, the level 3, that community and local institution influence. And that's how we create community level systems change. So, we want to create models for change. And I think that's how we don't have that one and done action. We create a model, we create that system, and we build within the system. So, as Grant said as well, the truth is we're going to have to change everything, right? And as we're especially touching in this fantastic summit today with Wake Up, is that, that includes the land conservation, that includes transportation, and local community, being a local community and being within a local community, we have to set the example within that system. So, as we know and have heard throughout this panel, especially on day one, the situation is dire. But I don't think that change, I don't think it has to look like a punishment, right, for being irresponsible. The human brain is wired not to like change. And so to paraphrase Charles Darwin, it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. So let's make change good. Let's make it desirable and cultivate creativity and togetherness. So level 3, right? Community and local institution level. So join committees, right? I think committees is a great way that actually bridges that level 3, level 4 interaction, that community with our local governments. In Apex, we have, as Emily said earlier, the Environmental Advisory Board, which was recently created, the Tree Citizens Advisory Panel. We also have a Bee City Committee. So these are all comprised of local citizens. And of course, we have staff support, but it's really that community local action that drives those committees. Create an environmental or climate coalitions group within your community with your friends and family, and bring that level 2 on board as well. Make a group for land conservation or transportation, or for a topic that you connect with, to also go back to Catherine Hayhoe's presentation, which was fantastic. You have to have that personal connection so that you have that energy and want to invest that time into the topic. Get involved with your favorite businesses. So seek out the owner of your favorite restaurant or retail shop. Have a conversation with principals at your school. I'm hoping that there are school-aged people here watching this event today. So speak to your principals, speak to your children's principals. Go to the farmers market, and or with Apex, we have an annual event called Peak Fest. So show up at these community events. Get involved with your neighborhood. So this one's more of that level 2, level 3 approach as well. So start that conversation with your neighborhood or HOA, and organize a tree planting event or an educational seminar on how to invest in solar. Create a community garden within your neighborhood. Start a walking event to a local bar on a Friday. Maybe you could even use it to raise money for your favorite climate solution. So there's lots of creative ways that are simple and complicated, but either way make the difference. April is coming up, that's Earth Month, so we have a great excuse to implement some of these. So my last point is something very important to me, which is when you're in those conversations, when you're in those meetings or those events, look around you. Who is there and who is not there? So we need to make sure that that there's a diversity of people who have a voice and a seat at the table. So invite these people, your neighbors, marginalized communities, create racial diversity and religious backgrounds. Make sure that you have a representative of all age groups. Invite your local sustainability coordinator. So the moral of the story is, we need to think about this from the middle out approach. So you get involved with the local community, with our local communities, and we are here to help you and support you. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Megan Pendell. Before I move on, I want to give Niki and Megan Anderson a chance to chime in, because engagement is such a huge issue. Do you guys have any thoughts before we kind of shift gears to some of the questions in the box?
Sure. I'll quickly say that, I've worked in local government for some time, and local governments aren't necessarily the best at engaging people. I think a lot of times we mean well, but we end up projecting our opinions, our thoughts onto the community. So I think it's really important that we actually listen. Right now, it's hard to have that face-to-face conversation because of the pandemic. So I would encourage all local governments, all participants on this call, to think through ways of engaging folks, virtually, whether it's through mail. So, I don't know these days, it's becoming much harder. We're going through a comprehensive plan process right now, and we're doing everything virtually. We have these little meetings in a box that we pass out. So we're trying to be creative in doing so, but what we want to accomplish is hear from people about how they feel related to the community, related to sustainability, and then try to truly take those ideas and then actually implement them. Many times we ask for somebody's opinion, and we don't necessarily factor those opinions into the ultimate implementation of the plan. Again, I would encourage folks to try a different way.
Thank you so much. Megan A.
Sure, yeah, no, and Megan, Pendell, and Niki, you guys have brought up some great points. I just want to say ditto on all those things. And as we're rolling out our climate plan, I think just as Niki had said, we're thinking a lot about how to engage as a city in general, and that there's a lot of improvement to be made. And it's been interesting even trying to get engagement during this time where we had to move to a virtual environment while we were trying to do stakeholder engagement for our climate plan. And so I think something else that really probably ties well with some of the things that Megan was laying out in such an inspiring way is around, we're talking a lot about impact. And so as a city, the city versus community role is so important. Although we're only 2% of our emissions, we have a ton of opportunity to provide support, be a leader. And there's a lot of things the city does that affects how the community can do things around transportation, waste for citizens that we pick up from residential, not as much business. Lots of different ways, planning, land use, all those different things. So where we can pull the levers and where we can empower citizens, we need to do that. And then again, behavior change, like everyone's alluding to, is also really important. And so, knowing that our biggest emissions are coming from the energy we use in our buildings, where we work, where we live, where we play. Energy and transportation is driving. Commuter vehicles is the majority of that, which may change after we've kind of got a new environment here. So teleworking was one of our strategies that we were going to try to be working on, and look, if there's a silver lining to how tough this time has been, there's been some lessons learned that we can look at as we move forward. But each individual is really important to this. Every decision you're making in your daily life is really important. And where can you have high impact? So think about your community and where you work. Where can you set a foundation for things to grow over time too? So we know that we can't do everything. We don't have all the time and the resources. We have a small but mighty team, I like to say too. So we're looking at, where we can set the foundation, break down barriers, create opportunities, so then people have an easier time than making impact as well. So lots of different examples of that. And I'll just do a little shameless plug. Are we going to rolling out our climate plan on March 2nd? So take a look in there, because there'll be a lot of specific kind of actions and things in there to kind of just start to spark people's minds. But we need you to kind of look at where we need to see impact, and how you can kind of work with your local community, where you work, where you play, and maybe break down a barrier so it makes it easier for everybody to take part as they're moving forward too. So yeah, I think it's going to be an exciting time for all of us to kind of take action and think about, one more thing, it doesn't have to be climate to lead with either. I think that's something that we're seeing, and just today in this conference and panel, climate change is really important, but we don't have to lead with that either. If there's the co-benefits that are created that help the environment, that help people, that's wonderful, and that's great too. So if we're looking at our housing plans, if we're looking at different plans, anytime we can build that in, so it's addressing equity, resilience, greenhouse gas mitigation, that's great. So how can we be creative and think outside of the box on the how we're implementing?
Oh, thank you for that transition. That was awesome. Because we have a comment, and I'm gonna hope that at least one of you has something to say about it, because I know that the Triangle J Council of Governments has worked a lot with the state as well as local jurisdictions in helping with affordable housing and issues like weatherization. So if someone has a fixed income or a low income, they're in an older home, that could reduce its energy bills, which means they have to pay less if they get their home retrofitted or weatherized. That's good for their bottom line. It's good for their health because they can stay in place, and it's good for the climate. So that's one example of sort of, there's multiple benefits to the community, for the climate, and really for the bottom line. So it's a perfect example. But the one question we have is, has there been any consideration in working with DEQ to expand the weatherization assistance program, not only to those under 200% federal poverty, but to get EE retrofits on homes and apartments for middle class and multifamily homes as well. I'll give one little bit of information, and that is there are people working at the state level right now to help bring down some of the financial barriers to doing home energy retrofits using a financial tool called PACE, the Property Assessed Clean Energy kind of loan. And those can be low or subsidized loans that live with the property. Because let's say Megan moves into a home and she isn't sure if she's going to be in that home for 5 years, and it would take 5 years to pay back on that loan. What a PACE loan would do would allow her to take out an energy efficiency loan, and the loan would live with the home. And then if she sells it after year 2, that loan would move to the next purchaser and be paid for through property tax bills. So it's happening, it's coming at the state level. Does anybody else want to say anything about weatherization and kind of that meeting of affordable housing and energy?
I'll say a few words, and then I'll look at Niki, because if anybody doesn't know, Niki used to work for City of Raleigh, and we really miss him, but also really glad he's doing the work he is in Wendell, because we need everybody working together as a region. So he can speak better than I can, but I'll just give a shout out that we have a really cool program called System Vision, and with affordable housing, where we're building to high energy efficiency. It's a partnership with Advanced Energy, and in that program, they guarantee the energy bills for 2 years, which is awesome. And when I was looking at some of the data, the bills could be $30, $40 a month, which is amazing. And they're also, on top of that, are training the builders on how to build these houses more energy efficient. And they also provide basically kind of support for the residents as well. If they're having any problems with their comfort in their home, they'll come out and check it out. They'll problem solve and figure it out. So it's kind of training folks how to kind of take care and do the maintenance in their homes as well. So that program I love, and really glad and support that we've got that going in our affordable housing. And I'll just mention, it's a big problem. Energy burden is something, I think the total cost of living in your home, we don't always think about that. So it's not even just how much it is to purchase a home or your rent, it's also the total cost of living there. And energy is a big one that I think kind of gets forgotten. But there's a high percentage of that. So ways for us to think about rolling out energy efficiency. And again, we need renewables, we need all those things, but energy efficiency, the kilowatt hour we don't use is the first thing we need to do before we're putting solar on top of something. And so really, really important. And there's also some issues with where if you do need assistance for weatherization, and you've got other issues going on in your house, how do we get people off those lists so they can get the assistance that they need? That's an issue that there's some great programs, again, that Housing and Neighborhoods does, and that we talk to some great folks in the community about. And I'll just say too, we need all these, like we're saying, we need everybody. Lots of really smart people out there that understand the financing and all the ins and outs and the complexities of how they even get things going. It is a tough one. So I'm really glad that there's a lot of conversations going on at the state, federal, and local level, because it's pretty complex.
So Megan, thank you for telling everybody about System Vision. That's a great program. And I want everybody to know, when I was in Raleigh, both Megan and Cindy were really pushing weatherization on housing and neighborhoods. And that's something we cared about, they still care about, and I care about today. You know, when I think about sustainability, I think about sustainability as this larger umbrella, but you know, under that larger umbrella, there are individuals. And the way we can help individuals become sustainable, or one way, is through, you know, weatherization programs or rehab programs. The city of Raleigh's got a great rehab program. I worked with it for many years. You know, we talked about loans, or you said something about loans. You know, if you're getting federal money, and this is Niki's perspective, nobody else's. If you're getting federal money, you don't necessarily have to provide somebody with a loan. You can give them a grant. Right now, there's obviously risk there if somebody, you know, leaves, takes the money and leaves, but you can put deed restrictions in place. So that's one thing we did in Raleigh, is that we provided folks with a grant. You know, folks who have fixed incomes, they tend not to be able to have the funds to afford HVAC units, new windows, new roof, whatever the repair may be. So they certainly are really not going to be able to pay those funds back. So, you know, again, that's just Niki's perspective. If you have a grant given to you, you just, you know, in kind, give it back to the community as a grant. Today in Wendell, we are doing something similar. We're not an entitlement community like Raleigh is. So we are working with Wake County. We're getting CDBG funds. I thought I left the CDBG world, but I'm right back in it doing the same thing, among other things. So it's great. But again, you know, I'm taking that same perspective of, you know, if we can help one person save some money on their electricity bill, we are allowing them to be more sustainable as an individual.
And I'll just add that, you know, Apex is in a draft stage, actually, of creating an affordable housing plan. We just had a public hearing comment period in January, and released a draft at the beginning of this month. And the vision is to meet the housing needs of a diverse population in Apex, connect affordable housing development with transit services, transportation infrastructure, and amenities in Apex. And we're going to partner regionally to meet housing needs of vulnerable populations. And then, of course, also welcome, attract, and retain diverse populations and raise community awareness. And then to the weatherization point, you know, we also, in this draft plan of the affordable housing plan, are talking about a program called Apex Cares, or the owner-occupied rehabilitation assistance program. So this is something that is hopefully going to happen within the next 2 years. It's definitely something that Apex is interested in and cares about. So this is going to be underway.
You guys are a dream to facilitate. I appreciate it. So something that is clear to me as a sustainability professional is that nationwide, we're seeing an urgency. And one of the questions in the Q&A reflects that. And specifically for Megan Anderson, it's about kind of this issue of city leadership. So I see your goal of 80% by 2050 as being very inspirational and aggressive. But the questioner makes the point that the UN recommends 0 by 2050. And so I think it's a little difficult at a staff level to comment on that, but I would give you an opportunity to react. and have the others add on as well, because I think it's a good thing that people are seeing the urgency. And then perhaps one way maybe we can all view it is, how can people who are passionate support city leadership in achieving their climate goals?
Yeah, no, thanks, Emily, and thanks for that question, whoever asked it. So, we think all the time about how we can have the highest impact. And so I'll say our city council set that goal quite a while ago, and it helped us work on this entire climate plan. Excuse me. I'll also mention something about our modeling. So our modeling is there to kind of help us figure out where we can have the biggest impact, where that things are. I do like to look at it as one of the tools in the toolbox, and then also look at just, now we know where our highest impact groups are, where our highest impact is to make change in different ways, not just with greenhouse gas, but also equity and resiliency. Those are also things we're looking at from an impact perspective. And then when you look at our goal, this is a huge problem and it's very complex and there's so many things to look at. And so we all need to work together and try to have as big of impact as we can. And so the way we measure that is so important. And so, yes, figuring out how we're going to get to 80 is really challenging. Figuring out how to get to 100 is also challenging too. And so I would encourage us to work as hard as we can on taking action and thinking about where we can have the highest impact, knowing that we kind of know a little bit about our buckets and where we want to go and where our challenges and barriers or opportunities are, and spend our time as much as possible having conversations about taking action and delivering foundational steps towards breaking down barriers and things as well as we get started. So totally in agreement that no matter what, having the highest impact is where we need to go. And the goalpost, we've got 2050 right now, on our goalpost there too. So the more we can do, and I think the more we do in the beginning in some places. And so for us, we're really focusing, you saw where Emily shared our impacts, and we know that the energy grid mix is really important. And for example, transportation and land use, if we look at, for example, one big strategy for us would be transportation electrification. So knowing that as the grid mix becomes cleaner, we have a lot more power and ways of kind of working with the community individually and at the city level and at the private developer level to help electrify transportation over time and what that looks like. And it's also kind of crazy to think about the fact that, our societies have been built on gas powered vehicles, and we're changing everything, which has a lot of different effects, and it gets kind of complex. We learned a lot when we were doing that transportation electrification study. We had no idea how much was getting in there, and actually how many opportunities there are within that too, to lift up equity, not lift people out of the conversation. And, I was floored when I learned the statistic by 2040, over 55% of new vehicles are going to be electric. 2040 is like tomorrow for a city. I mean, Niki can say that for planning, like that's like tomorrow, or yesterday. So we are just, trying to think of ways to break down those barriers to move forward. And so goals are there for us to kind of think aspirationally. And yes, our goal could be different, but at the same time, we're working as hard as we can to try to figure out how to make the biggest impact. And so I'd love to, really focus in on those deliverables and those impact areas and keep us going on trying to get there.
Thank you. I want to give the other two folks an opportunity to comment. I'm getting a little feedback. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Okay. Megan, Pendell, and Niki, would you guys, do you care to talk about the urgency issue? Like to give you the opportunity. I think it's real.
Oh, it's absolutely real. And Megan Anderson made some fantastic points. Apex, we have 100% clean energy goal by 2050 for our town operations, and a stepping stone goal of 80% by 2035, is just as a reminder. And so, this is very ambitious and impressive. And I, for one, am going to always be a realistic optimist and say that we can do it. But it's going to take a lot of work, and I think it's going to take all of us. The environment knows no boundaries. So really, we are all Raleigh, Apex, Wendell. we're all the same community, right? So along with our neighbors. So I think we all have to work together on this, and the more that we each do, the better it is for all. I encourage and challenge our community in Apex to rise to, I guess, petition or ask for a community-wide goal. Right now our goal is for town operations. We think that we need to set the example and move forward with us, and then bring the community with us. So I challenge our community to rise up and have, as I said before, every voice at the table, including those who have been there from the beginning. I grew up in Apex, so I've seen the rapid change, and I know there's quite a few out there like me too. But of course, 14 residents per day an average. There's a lot of newbies too. So we're all part of the peak of good living, as we say. But having both of those voices at the table, and we all need to put in our own actions together within those models to reach our goals and to reach our stepping stones as well.
Niki, do you mind if I give you a little bit of a twofer? Because Megan Pendell, thank you so much for that response. She sort of helped me bring it together a little bit. So we're all growing at leaps and bounds in the Triangle. One estimate I saw is that by 2050, that we can expect an 86% population growth in our region, which is really tough to imagine. But many times you'll see someone moving here, and we're so glad to have wonderful, engaged citizens moving here, but they say, in Boston, we did this, we need to do this here. And so one question that we have in the chat is about how serious is the lack of home rule on climate and environmental justice issues in North Carolina? And, as a planning professional, Niki, I feel like, you're accustomed to talking folks through that. And we in the sustainability field are too now. So it's a perfect time to kind of tee that up. So you've got the home rule question, and also a little bit like the urgency question.
Sure. As it relates to urgency, I think that as our community continues to grow, I think the sense of urgency kind of increases. Not that there wasn't this recognition of a need of sustainability in the past, but just we are growing so rapidly right now. And this small town is just not used to it, right? And people from all over are coming here and saying stuff like, "Hey, what about home rule?" Or other ideas that just may not be feasible at this time for our community. So, we are Dillon's Rule State, and we are creatures of the state. Do I think that's going to change anytime soon? I don't think so. I'm not trying to be pessimistic, but I think that it's our responsibility to think through how we go around things, how we can work through things, how we can negotiate things. So I think there's a lot of flexibility there. We don't necessarily have to be a home rule state to make changes. I think we need to understand where everybody's coming from, because it's kind of a give and take, right? I mean, I think that if we want, for example, to grow in a more, I'll use smart growth. If we want to grow in a smarter way, and we want transportation, and we need funding for transportation. I know Raleigh is all about BRT right now, and believe it or not, Wendell would love to connect to BRT, but Nightdale's got to connect first. So that's a lot of money. So I think there are ways for us to kind of partner with other municipalities, partner with the state, partner with our legislatures, partner with the private sector, because there's a lot of pull in the private sector. They have, connections of their own, of course, the nonprofit sector. So if everybody's working towards the same goal, I think the need of a home rule state probably is not as germane as people may think. And again, candidly, do I think it's going to ever change? Probably not.
Yeah, and sustainability is just a fascinating field, and I find that many times we are in the role of translating, right? And so, what being a Dillon's Rule State translates to, in my mind, is we can, at the local government level, only regulate or put ordinances toward actions that the state has explicitly given us the authority to do. So what happens in some cases is a local government might say, you know, the state hasn't told us we could do this, but they haven't told us we couldn't. And then a municipality will enact an ordinance. And then if there's enough complaining at the state legislature level, then there'll be a law that says local governments cannot regulate X, right? And so we can only do what the legislature says we can do at the local government level. So that's the difference between home rule and Dillon's rule. Dillon's rule, which is most of the Southeast, is like that. Whereas home rule, each individual city can pass, let's say, energy efficiency ordinances that make buildings be built to the International Energy Code, for example. And at the state of North Carolina, that's regulated at a state level. So that's what that means. We're going to wrap up soon, but there is this question, and I think it's relevant to all local governments. It's targeted a bit toward Raleigh, but the question is about once you put into place these amazing plans, right? So what metrics do you use to make sure that the goals happen? Because many of you know and have been in local government that, you know, local government is a political organization, and sometimes plans with metrics that are tracked over time help achieve broader goals that aren't as swayed by the political winds. So I would ask Megan, you know, you guys are coming out with your climate action plan next month. Congratulations to you and your staff. Yay! What metrics do you have in place in that particular plan? And if you want to speak more broadly about other plans, one reference was to a Raleigh's Greenway goals, which I know isn't your specific area, but I think the question is still pertinent nevertheless.
Yeah, no, thank you for whoever brought that up, because I'm going to use this as an opportunity to kind of do another shameless plug and say data is really hard. And so there's a lot of really great data out there, and actually a lot of wonderful organizations and people that are tracking things. And we have a lot of good data in the city too. And so we have thought a lot about this. And I think as we get started, we're trying to bite the elephant off one, bite at a time. And so we're trying to think about, again, I know I sound like a broken record, impact and a little bit also as we get started. There are a lot of data points out there. And then if you think of something like greenhouse gas inventories, those are a really, really high level view of what emissions look like. If you track that every year, you're not going to see much change. If you track that every 5 years, hopefully we're seeing a bigger change, and it's not drilling down to action levels. So how can we track things that are tied to the actions we're taking to see if those are making an impact in the way of mitigation, equity, resilience? And so don't have all those answers, but that's why we need everybody to be thinking about this. There's a lot of smart people out there. There's a lot of data being collected. As you get started on your actions, we want you to think one of your first questions is, how can I track this? Am I tracking the amount of folks that I'm talking to? That's a good, that's even a good metric to say, how much impact am I having on who I'm reaching out to? And then as you're getting programs going, it's really hard sometimes to figure out how to track it, but as you get started, it's better to do it then than it is later. So we're thinking about, again, who are our high impact groups? And so as we think about transportation, energy efficiency, energy use in buildings, our business community, for example, is a big one where they have a lot of facilities. There's developers, they're building houses, they're building developments for our businesses. And so how do we have them work together to think about, a lot of them are already doing these things. So can we lift up groups that are already tracking their energy data, figuring out how to be more efficient and where the opportunities are, and things like transportation. Are you tracking how your employees are getting to work or how folks are getting to you? Because those commuting vehicle miles traveled and how folks are getting there too. Are you connecting so people can potentially walk or bike to where you're at? And so there's just so many things for us to think about with data that can help us make decisions over time. And I'll just say, as we get started, we're not going to have all the data, we're not going to have everything, but we're hoping everybody's taking action. And so we're hoping that everybody's starting to think about tracking their impact, so we can first do some storytelling and help people understand where they can have impact and how these things make connections. And then also, almost like white papers, who's doing a really good job that we can use as a model? What can we learn from them? What's different about what you're doing? And so data can help us in so many ways. And we're trying to think about it from a storytelling perspective, from a performance-based perspective, and then also like how to track something like greenhouse gases, which is kind of an intensive process every maybe 5 years, and then on the ground connecting performance metrics to actions over time. But that's hard, and it's going to be an ongoing process that we hope we're just going to get better and better with over time. I could go on forever. I'll stop there.
We're getting close to the end, and I'm feeling bad because we promised the audience that we would talk more about equity, and we're at an hour. Sustainability obviously draws very passionate professionals. I want to thank all three of you and thank Wake Up Wake County and the sponsors. Just want to give you guys just 30 seconds to close out. And Megan, I don't know if you want to plug GARE and their 5 questions or whatever, but I'm going to start with Megan Pendell, please.
Yes, thank you, Emily, also for facilitating this conversation. It was a great conversation, and happy to be on it with you. And thank you, Wake Up Wake County, as well. We need more conversations like this. That's the bottom line. So, equity is definitely a huge piece in this, and I'm glad that we're talking about it. Apex is here to work on plans, and we are looking to places like Raleigh, as Megan Anderson said, that we have to, we're not reinventing the wheel, but we also want to think creatively about solutions. So there's a balance there. And so we're looking to examples for our sustainability action plan, or ASAP. And we'll be also thinking how, the personality and our small town charm of Apex as we grow. So thank you all.
Thank you. Niki Jones.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Wake Up Wake County. And I appreciate Megan Squared here allowing me to be the third wheel, because you guys are in the sustainability stuff every single day. And I really appreciate you guys allowing me to be on the panel with you. I will just quickly say that folks can count on Wendell trying to grow in an appropriate manner and trying to be responsible in what we do, and be good neighbors, because it's not just us, right? We know we have to work with everybody else. And hopefully in our comprehensive planning process that should wrap up at the end of the summer, we'll have some really good implementation tools and some points that we can really hit to kind of make Wake County a better place. So thank you all.
Yeah, and I'll just say really quickly, thank you, Emily, and thank you everybody as well. And just March 2nd, take a look at our climate plan. We laid out a process we went through for equity there, and a little bit more about our work around that. Lots more to do. We don't have it all figured out, but it's an opportunity for us to kind of set some foundations again for this work and conversations, and what questions you can ask yourself as you're getting started on your actions that might help you think about how you can implement in an equitable way. And so really, if you take a look at that, that's just a starting point from conversations. And I just want to give a shout out and thank you to so many people in the community that helped us put this together, and for everybody here today that's interested in this, as well as my fellow panelists and Emily for leading us, and Wake Up Wake County. Thank you for hosting these conversations.
Thanks so much. And I just want you guys to know the Q&A was full and we didn't get to everyone, but thank you so much to everyone listening for your interest and your passion. Feel free to reach out to any one of us to follow up. I'm at ebarrett@tjcog.org. I noticed there were some questions about PACE, so I'm happy to engage with you in that way. Thanks again, and we'll turn it back over to Nathan.
Thank you all. This was incredible. Thank you, Emily, for moderating this and facilitating it. Megan Anderson and Megan Pendell and Niki Jones, thank you for participating. I hope folks saw what we're hoping to put together in terms of just a large swath of our county. you know, Wendell and Raleigh and Apex are very, very different communities, and the wonderful diversity that we have when it comes to how we're going to solve this problem is going to be the way that we tackle this this issue. And thanks to the leadership of TJ Cog and the expertise of all you guys. We really appreciate it.